Welcome to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannonohara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Hello, you. Yes, I'm talking to you listening right now, reaching for this. I am so appreciative of your attention and your interest. Welcome to this podcast episode brought to you by the 5 Elements of Intimacy. I am so excited to announce the release of a new Access Consciousness book authored by Gary and Dane called The 5 Elements of Intimacy. Now, for all of you relationship people, for all of you sex people, for all of you people that are interested in having an easier time in your own life, liking yourself more, I promise you these 5 elements of intimacy will be the salve that heals all pain, all self-hatred, all self-judgment, and I might even go so far as to say the panacea that changes the insanity that we act out on ourselves and the insanities that we act out on our relationships. Now, I know that's a big claim, but let's talk about the 5 elements of intimacy. So let's talk about what are the 5 elements of intimacy. Coined by Gary Douglas are honor, allowance, vulnerability, gratitude, and trust. Now, obviously, Gary is not the inventor of the concept of honor, allowance, vulnerability, trust, and gratitude, but he puts them together in this really cool way to help all of us that are willing to choose these in relationship with ourselves and in relationships with others. So, have any of you ever dealt with something I think I'm gonna talk a lot about from the position and the direction of having these with yourself first and foremost. For if you don't have these elements with yourself, you cannot really have them with another person. There could be a layer or a level of vulnerability and trust or gratitude, allowance, that you have for another, but if it doesn't exist for you in your universe, it's not really going all the way. It's not like the full picture. So it has to start with you, which is awesome and will deeply change your whole experience of being you. So, honor, to treat with regard. If we have like a ratio scale here, how much do you honor you from, the scale of like 1 to 100? What's the ratio of honoring you, treating you with regard, making choices that take care of you? What's your ratio? Are you like 100% honoring of you? Now, if you judge you, is that honoring you? So if you really like start to look at like what would have to change in your life and like what would honoring you change? How much impact would the prioritization or the commitment to honoring you how much impact would that have on your life as a whole and all your relationships? So when you replace, for example, self-judgment, if you fully replaced it with honor, allowance, vulnerability, trust, or gratitude, like pick your one or put them all there. If you replaced self-judgment with those, would that change your life? Duh, like obviously. So what determines if you have honor for self and others? Well, your choice. And this is why the 5 elements of intimacy, in my opinion, are so awesome because they're free and they're just a choice away. Now, is it a choice that you just make once and then you're fixed for the rest of your life? If you're an adult and you're listening to this, probably not. If you were taught from day one, let's imagine that you were raised by people who had the 5 elements of intimacy with themselves. They trusted themselves, they were grateful for themselves, they had allowance for themselves, they honored them, and they had vulnerability with themselves, would they have raised what would that have been like to grow up with people like that? And that would then teach you those for you. So if you were taught these from day 1, easy breezy. And unfortunately, those don't tend to be the qualities that we are taught in relationships, uh, with self and others. So as an adult, it's like I've been going through some like when you choose consciousness, you're like always going on pretty big transformations. And some of them can be very uncomfortable because they deeply affect or alter, you know, things that you have fundamentally believed, that you've relied on, that you ultimately function from as a point of view about you or a point of view about like reality, how you relate to all sorts of things. And so I've been going through some pretty big changes that have not been particularly pleasant things for me to look at about myself. Really having to be honest with things that I've been choosing that have been creating outcomes that I'd like to change. And it has been so easy and seductive to slip into judging myself around this stuff, to making myself wrong and or right, using right as a safety blanket essentially, which doesn't change anything. So it's been a real practice and exercise for me to instead of judging myself, criticizing myself, not liking myself, to really turn to the 5 elements of intimacy, to really have vulnerability with what I'm going through, to trust that I can change, to have allowance for the process, whether it's pretty or ugly or hard or easy, have allowance for whatever this process is, to honor that I'm worth going through these changes and have the gratitude for, I the gift of getting to change and gratitude for me. And sometimes that's a conversation. It's like I'm putting a layer of gratitude on top of a layer of judgment. But after enough choosing of gratitude, self-gratitude, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And then instead of just pretending like I'm grateful on top of judgment, the gratitude actually starts to take over territory from judgment. And that's due to choosing gratitude enough. So when I first learned this idea of applying these ways of being to myself, I realized some of them I could function from with more ease than others. For example, trust, I kinda knew what trust was. That one I was more connected with. Allowance, on the other hand, I could hear the words, I understood the concept, but it just wasn't like, it was like a non-reality to me, essentially. Same with gratitude, actually, and vulnerability. Um, and the more that so basically what I would do is I'd be like, "Okay, allowance, allowance, allowance," and I would meditate on allowance. Okay, so what is allowance? And I would look at all of my reasons and justifications for not being an allowance, i.e., like, because I'm a control freak, or I prefer to be in control, or, um if I'm an allowance, then I'm letting them down, or like somehow I thought like control and having a point of view was like being there for people in a better way because that's what I learned. Like you force your points of view on the people that you care about, and that proves that you care. Whereas allowance is actually true caring. Allowance is not expecting or projecting that anyone needs to change, and it lets them make the choices that they want to make and need to make for them. And oh my god, allowance is so much easier than projecting and expecting, judging, controlling. So just being able to implement, like, allowance in my relationships for others has made my life infinitely easier, and then the real special sauce for me was, including allowance for me in that equation. Oh, wow. And if any of you guys out there can relate to this, it's like, you know, if you have had huge criticisms of yourself or get really stuck in this wrongness dialogue about you or are really judgmental and or even it bleeds over into hating yourself. Wow. Adding allowance for self, like once you can get allowance, once the choice for allowance is made for you, oh, for me, I'll speak for myself, it took away the pain of that insanity. And allowance for me doesn't mean I'm giving up on myself. It means I'm in allowance. And then the cool thing that comes after allowance is more choice, more choice, more choice, more choice. So when you administer these 5 elements together, all together, they're like really a constellation. They're a prescription that's best taken together. If you can add them all, not only will your relationship with yourself and others be not only pain-free, but peaceful, you will be a source for something that very few people choose and master. You know, it's like judging it's whether we like it or not, we as a human race do all sorts of weird things and think all sorts of weird things, like that judging the people that we care about is somehow I'm not even really sure what we think. I just know that there's a lot of judgment and that if you really cared for somebody, if you really cared for you, would you judge them and would you judge you? And if instead of judging, let's just baby steps, like baby bites, bite-sized pieces. If you replaced, you know, the judgment you have of you or your body today for even 30 seconds with one of the 5 elements of intimacy, what would honoring you more be? What would the choice for honoring create? What would choosing honor for self be? What would it take to have more allowance for you? I.e., like the opposite of judgment? Like, what would it take to have more allowance for you? What would it take to have more allowance for everybody? And what would it take to have the vulnerability and the trust in yourself to have the best of you, to acknowledge the worst of you without judgment, to look at what you're choosing that might not be creating the outcomes you desire in your life, whether that's in your other relationships, whether that's with money, whether that's with health, your body, your sense of living. If you're vulnerable, is that weak? Or is that the strongest place to start transforming deeply with yourself? If you don't trust you, does that make it easier to change or harder to change? And what determines whether you trust you or not? Well, you. Newsflash, you determine whether you trust you or not. You know, everywhere you're looking for something or someone else to trust you, to give you trust before you can trust you, it's like, it's this what's again circling back to, could you choose these? Will you choose these? And I'm just so, 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 so excited for this 5 Elements of Intimacy book to be out in the world. By the way, link for pre-order and the landing page will be in the show notes for those of you guys that do want to have more of this in your life. Um, it's a choice, and for me, it's a very worthy quest for I wanna have, like, relationships that nourish me and wanna be able to receive, and to receive people that care about me, to be a gift to those that I care for, it requires me to be an allowance of them and me. It requires me to be grateful because it's like one of the things like gratitude, I think gratitude's an interesting one in this conversation, in this landscape, in this day and age, because there is a lot of conversation about gratitude. There's even like research on gratitude and how it transforms your biochemistry, how your points of view create your reality. And I know at one point I've been married for 13 years and I was really like being critical, being super judgmental of my husband, and just not like sometimes to him, but also just in my own head, just being like so annoyed and all this. And my dad was like, who is the author of the Five Elements of Intimacy book. He goes, well, why don't you start looking at what you're grateful for about your husband? And it was like, so duh. Like, it's like such a obvious place to go now that I look back on it. And at the time, being grateful felt like hard, actually, which I don't love to admit. I think it's a kind of a not one of my best qualities. And but that being said, one of my other good qualities is being honest with self and not pretending or sugarcoating um, that I'm not making particular choices. So back then, gratitude felt hard. And I later learned that it wasn't really because I didn't know gratitude or didn't know how to be grateful. It was because I had practiced. I had so programmed myself for criticism that gratitude was like this really weak muscle in my universe. The choice for gratitude had to be developed. Being critical and being unhappy in my marriage was hurting me. It was not a fun place to function from. So I knew that making the man that I loved wrong was like I knew there was something wrong in that behavior. I couldn't even as right as I felt about my points of view, I knew that it was something in there was incorrect. And I thought, well, if I don't like him, should I really be married? And I really started looking at that and I started instead of trying to be logical about it or be in control of my points of view, I just took my dad's advice and I started being grateful. And I started at the time, brutal honesty, had to force myself to be like, okay, this is something I'm really grateful for about him. And it started with like little things like when he, helps with the dishes or um, does something else nice for me, which to be fair was lots of stuff. And every day I would look at more and more what I was grateful for about him, and the well or the the buildup of gratitude in my account for towards my husband got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's sort of like a gratitude credit that would outweigh the judgments. And it really saved my marriage. It helped me not destroy my marriage. It really helped me not push away this great gift in my life who, isn't perfect. Newsflash, none of us are. And if you can either look through eyes of criticism or you can look through eyes of gratitude. And if you can be grateful, your life will be so much more blessed. And yeah, that's a choice. Yeah, that's a big choice. Um, So I can't really say enough good things about the 5 elements of intimacy and the way that they're taught. Uh, they're in the Access Foundation class, and now there's going to be a great book coming out um, that will be sure to change your life. And it's it, it's such an enthusiasm for me to be able to talk about these things that really this stuff hits home. Like, this is not like a surface conversation. This is a real, like, deep in your guts kind of talk where you're going to be able to have a much easier, far more pleasant and beautiful, blessed life if you prioritize honor, allowance, vulnerability, trust, and gratitude. And yeah, so excited for those of you guys to get your hands on the book and to make the world a more grateful, more honorable, easier space and place. And if it's not about the world becoming, more honorable, then it is about you getting to have a choice that benefits you. So I will be also joined by Gary and Dane on the Consciousness Anywhere podcast later on after the book is released to really get to have a really cool conversation about where the tools came from, how they're taught, and all the awesome energies that are involved with making your life more conscious and more free. I appreciate you for tuning in. Click the link in the show notes for your pre-purchase of the 5 Elements of Intimacy book. How does it get like infinitely better than this? Bye. Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who you know who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on Shannon-Ohara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.